Good afternoon. My name is Hugh Forrest, and I am the Chief Programming Officer here at South by Southwest. It is so great to have all of you back for March Magic in Austin. Our first speaker for this afternoon's session is someone who has almost single-handedly sold mainstream America on the concept that pitching your innovative new startup to a panel of savvy investors is cool. An entrepreneur in every sense of the word, Damon John has come a long way from launching the globally celebrated lifestyle brand FUBU on the streets of New York City with only $40. Since then, he's pioneered the fashion industry and took FUBU to over $6 billion in global product sales. He's received countless awards from organizations like Brand Week, Advertising Age, and Ernst & Young. Most recently, Damon and his team at the Shark Group won 2 Webby Awards for his event, Black Entrepreneurs Day. As a champion for entrepreneurship in the United States and around the globe, Damon serves as a presidential ambassador for global entrepreneurship under President Barack Obama and traveled with the president to South Africa and Cuba to meet with and inspire local entrepreneurs. Damon is a New York Times best-selling author, top speaker, and brand consultant, and to where I started with this intro, you can currently watch him every Friday night on his 13th season as a shark on the Emmy Award-winning business show Shark Tank. Please give a huge South by Southwest welcome to Damon John.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, so I'm excited to be here. Thank you, South by Southwest. Thank you, Meta, for having us, and thank you all for being in person. Doesn't it feel good, right? To be in person. All right, well, let me tell you why I'm here. First of all, I did create a brand called FUBU, but I had to depend on the gatekeepers back then. I had to beg people to put my stuff in music videos. If I had $100, I made 100 flyers. I couldn't target who I was going to hit. If I made an ad, I had to wait for somebody to put it out 30, 60, 90 days later. The power is now in our hands. Because of Meta and the world we're in today, it democratized a lot of things. When FUBU had some bad press about it, I couldn't get one right then in a second and fight that and talk about the truth and where I came from and what I was doing. We now have the power to do that. You can be in another country now and you can sell goods wherever you want. So I'm here today to talk about how that is expanding with Meta and with one of the most well-recognized entrepreneurs in history. So I'm here to talk about Metaverse and Web3, leveling the playing field and giving everyone a shot. So I'm going to read a quick bio. I don't think I need to, but I want to. This man's name is Mark Zuckerberg, is the founder, and chairman, and CEO of Meta, which he originally founded as Facebook in 2004. He rebranded Meta to show how the company is moving beyond 2D screens towards immersive experiences like augmented and virtual reality. But he is also the co-founder and co-CEO of the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, which with his wife Priscilla, and they are leveraging technology to help solve some of the world's toughest challenges, including supporting the science and technology that will make it possible to cure, prevent, or manage all diseases by the end of the 21st century. I mean, you got to give it up for that, right? Introducing Mr. Zuckerberg. Welcome, Mr. Zuckerberg.
Hey, it's good to be with you, Damon.
Thank you. What's going on?
Well, I feel a bit weird to be the only one who's not there in person today, but a lot of the technology and everything that we're building is about being able to feel present with people no matter where you are. So I feel like that kind of fits.
You're in the
But
meta.
look, but before we jump into everything today, I think this is probably the first time I've spoken publicly, since the really terrible war has broken out in Ukraine and the invasion over there. And so I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge what's going on. And it's obviously it's really tough to find any the right words that really mean anything in a situation like this or make anything better. But I just want to kind of acknowledge and kind of express how much I've been thinking about those who have been affected by this invasion, whether you have family or friends over there or you come from there, or just worried about this because it's just a massively destabilizing world event to an order that we've all kind of lived with and depended on for a while. So we have teams working across the company that are working on trying to make sure that our services are available and that people can stay connected during this time. We're going to keep on working on that. But look, I know that's not the main topic that we wanted to talk about today, but I just wanted to mention it up front. Just share my support for everyone in Ukraine and with everything that's going on. So I know it's a bit weird and tough to have a conversation about the future and the metaverse and Web3 and all these exciting things, but with all this going on, but I am optimistic that if we and the community do a good job, then we can help contribute to building a world where there's more opportunity around the world, and that's hopefully what we're here to do. So thank you for having me. I'm really excited and glad to be here with you today.
Thank you, Mark. It hits home. My wife is of Ukrainian descent, and I think that sometimes people look at us as CEOs and think that they don't believe that we're human, and it hits home, and we all are very concerned, and we like to know that people in your position, it is on top of mind. My organization I love to work with is World Central Kitchen. They're out there on the ground, and they're helping people over there. Absolutely. But more important, somebody watching us right now in this audience, whether here or virtually, will change the world in a better way. And that's why we're here to talk about it, because somebody here or many people here will be able to fight atrocities like this in the future and protect us all. So thank you. Let's get on to it. I'm gonna start asking you a couple of questions, and let's go to the basics. What is the metaverse, and what is Meta's take on it, and how will yours be different than the others out there?
Sure. So I believe that the metaverse is the next chapter of the internet, right? Just like we had the mobile internet, I think this is going to be the successor to that. And the defining characteristic of the metaverse is that you really feel like you're present with other people or in another place, right? So it's different from the internet that we experience today, in that today you might look at documents, you might look at a website, but in the future you're going to be in it. Right. And I think that that's going to be, more of the time is going to be spent with experiences like that. And no matter where you are in the world, you'll basically have the ability to feel like you're right there and present with another person, which, that feeling of presence and everything that comes with it, the sense that you're right there with another person, it's really this kind of very magical sensation, and it's extremely human. And in a lot of ways, it's like the holy grail of the types of social experiences that I and a lot of people at Meta have wanted to build for a long time, but now the technologies are starting to get to the point where it's possible. You asked how our metaverse is going to be different. I don't actually think that any company, a metaverse isn't a thing that a company builds. It's sort of like the next chapter of the internet overall. And just like you wouldn't say that, that Facebook was building an internet before, I don't think you'd say that Meta is building a metaverse now. Our goal is to basically help build some of the fundamental technologies to contribute to bringing the metaverse to life. But a lot of what I'm excited to talk to you about today is the massive creator economy, that I just think that there's this huge opportunity around this, because we can help build some of the foundational tech, right? Whether it's the VR headsets or the AR headsets or the networks or the kind of the social presence systems, some of the remote rendering systems, to be able to do all this stuff really well and make it accessible. But at the end of the day, the people who are building the different experiences, whether they're games or entertainment or productivity tools or ways to express yourself, or clothing, right? Because if you're spending a lot of time in here, that's obviously an important part of how you express yourself. I mean, you know that better than almost anyone. I mean, these are going to be basically creators who are basically building all of these different experiences, and I think that's going to create this massive new economy around a lot of this that that hopefully will support many, many millions of jobs and people doing the kind of creative work that that they want to, instead of maybe the kinds of jobs that they feel they have to today. So that's sort of what I'm excited about here. I do think that this is pretty clearly the next evolution in terms of how we experience media and moments. One of the trends that I've seen since I started the company back in 2004 was people are always basically looking to share their experience and to experience other people's experiences in the richest way that they can, that technology allows them to do easily. In 2004, when I got started, that was mostly text, right? That's why Facebook started as a website where
Right.
your profile was primarily text. You type that in, but then a few years later, we all got phones that had cameras, and the primary way that we started sharing became visual. Initially photos, because the mobile networks that we had weren't quite good enough for a while to be able to do video seamlessly without buffering, right? It would take a while to upload. But now in the last several years, we've really gotten to the place where we've gone from text to photos, and now video is really the main way that we share our experiences and record them and experience things online, right? I mean, we've seen that across our services. Video is just a huge amount of the time that people are spending at this point. But I just don't believe that that's the end of the line. I think you go from text to photos to video. The next logical step beyond that is basically having a medium where you could just be immersed in it and feel like you're right there with other people. And that's really the essence of what the metaverse is about. And all the technology that we're building is all about trying to deliver that sense of presence and immersion, which I think is just going to enable an awesome set of different social and other experiences.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, so many people don't understand the power of that. My friend Eric Thomas happens to be a quadriplegic, and he doesn't have movement in any of his body. But now he can run on the beach. Now he can dance. A more mature couple can go back to the days when they were just dancing in a ballroom when they first got married or first met each other. How are you finding other ways that the people are finding connectivity in the metaverse?
Yes, I mean, there's all these really amazing experiences that people are building already. I mean, a lot of it started off with games,
Right.
but now we're actually seeing that most of the time spent in in Quest, for example, in our virtual reality headsets, is actually in social experiences. So we built the social experience platform called Horizon, and people are building all kinds of amazing stuff in there. Everything from a comedy club that people can go and tell jokes to there's a creator. Angel Artiste, she's a 25-year-old Brooklyn-based teacher and artist, built a museum for Black art where she's selling pieces of art that she makes. So she's a creator and just building all these different kinds of experiences. So you have that. There's an awesome set of things that we're seeing around productivity. We built this tool, Workrooms, where you're basically you can have a meeting in there. You're around a table with people and you feel like you're right there. And it's pretty interesting to experience because obviously the avatars are not yet at the same photorealistic fidelity of kind of a Zoom call, right, or a video conference where you don't kind of see someone in a photorealistic way yet. But in a lot of ways, I think it actually feels more real to be around a virtual table with people and be able to gesture and make eye contact with people and look at them. And you can kind of, if there's a bunch of people around the table, you can turn to your side and whisper something to the person next to you, which you can't do on a video call. It's there's a lot of stuff that I think is just because of that feeling of presence ends up being a lot it's quite magical, even for where it is now. But you can just imagine as the fidelity of this stuff gets better and better, just the economy around it is going to be huge, and the experiences are just going to keep on getting better.
Yeah, I believe we are in such an embryonic stage, but that's true. I don't know if I want to ever open up offices again, but I have some people who never want to go into an office, and I have some people who say, you know what, I want to be part of community. I don't like where I live, or I don't want to I want to get out of the house, and maybe 2 hours a day they are in this world, in the metaverse, and they're connecting. But let's talk about avatars for a reason, for a minute, and e-commerce and how things are going to happen. I'm just curious, what are people going to do in the future? They're going to have one avatar, or they're going to have 6 avatars, right? Because, if you're at a business meeting, you show up to my business meeting as a dragon, sooner or later I'm gonna be like, yo, Tom, fire the dragon, right? But maybe, maybe I'm talking about creators, and you do show up as a dragon. I go, yo, hire the dragon, right? So what are we thinking about in e-commerce? Listen, I could be doing this speech right now, and now there could be 10 million people, and I say, if you would have bought a gold FUBU sweatshirt, and you line up, and now I'll bring you on stage, and those 10 gold FUBU sweatshirts were issued out. What are you thinking about in that type of world?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different possibilities here, but fundamentally, I think you're right. You're not just going to want to represent yourself in one way all the time. There's going to be this spectrum from, photorealistic. Maybe if you're kind of in a formal business meeting or something in the future, rather than doing a video chat, you'll just put on a headset, whether it's a VR headset or AR glasses, and someone can show up as a hologram on your couch or around your table. And maybe in that setting, you want it to be more formal and more realistic, so you're your photorealistic self. But then, some of the time you're going to just want to be a little more playful, and you'll want to maybe be a stylized version of yourself. Some of the time you're going to want to be something that's kind of completely not anchored in your identity at all. You use the example of a dragon. But the basic thing that I kind of think about here is that opportunity around the world is not equally distributed, right? So you were talking about people getting back in the office. There are a lot of reasons why people want to be in person with each other, and why the technology is not as good yet as people being in person. So I think that's going to be true for a while. People are going to want to get together. But I also think it's the case that a lot of people's opportunities, whether they're social opportunities or economic opportunities, has been really anchored to where physically they were, where they were born, where they happen to live, where their families are. And I hope through some of this technology that we can try to break that down and make it so that no matter where you physically are anchored, and wherever you physically want to be, you can jump into the metaverse and teleport to a different place, or anywhere around the world, or in a place that's kind of a completely new thing that a creator made, and access all of the opportunity everywhere. So in that world, just like we've done a lot more video conferences over the last couple of years with COVID, I think there are going to be a lot of different contexts where people are just hanging out socially in the metaverse. I think that there are going to be a lot of professional contexts where people are either doing meetings in something like workrooms, or selling things in e-commerce, basically environments, stores in the metaverse. So you're going to want to kind of express yourself in different ways. So if you think about how many hours a day you might spend on a video conference today. You care about the clothing that you wear when you're on video conference. And right. I think similarly, you're going to care about how you express yourself and both the avatar and the clothing that you're wearing with that avatar. So I think there's going to be a really vibrant economy. I was actually going to ask you when we'll get FUBU gear on Horizon and some of these platforms. But I think that's going to be, this is, a lot of people are going to want to express themselves in different ways. And it just seems like there is going to be a big economy around here. If people are spending time there, they're going to want to express themselves like they do with clothing in the physical world. Part of what I'm really focused on is interoperability around this, because I think it's really important as you go from one experience to the next, that you can bring your sweater or your jacket or whatever it is that you want to express yourself. I mean, it's just, a lot less useful if everything that you buy is constrained to one app or one game. And that's going to really inhibit the creator economy, because, if it's not that useful for people to buy clothing in one game because they can't, or one experience because they can't bring it to another one, then they might not buy as much stuff, which means that there will be a smaller creator economy for everyone. So I think interoperability is really important. And that's where some of the Web3 stuff that we touched on or earlier mentioned comes in, because I think that really allows to build some of the infrastructure to make some of these metaverse experiences more decentralized and interoperable over time. And we really want to lean into that, because I think that trend of being able to kind of express yourself and bring your stuff with you across all these different experiences is just going to be so important to this creative economy reaching its full potential here.
Yeah, this creative economy, I am so excited to be alive at this time of my life. I remember there was an old saying, and there's so many people here watching us who are on the cutting edge and the creators and they're entrepreneurs. I remember there was an old saying, when we moved from the agricultural age to the industrial age, if you were a farmer and you were plowing with your donkey and you saw somebody with a tractor and you said, oh, that tractor, that's not worth anything. Well, then there's two jackasses on the field now, right? And I think that's where we're going with these amazing creators. We're going to create so much good stuff. Now, Meta has incredible apps. They have Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, and those are things that we go to daily. When I first went on most of those things, I couldn't wait to wake up and go on it again. What do you believe is going to be the daily call or the daily drive for people to want to be, in the metaverse?
Well, I think it's a couple of different things, but it's, and there are different things for different people. I mean, you probably use a computer for somewhat different things than I do, or people in the audience, right? It's like some people play more games, some people, maybe they use like Excel on their computer to build models for things, and other people, are primarily using it to make Zoom calls, right? Or different things. So there are all these different uses, and I think what we're going to see is the devices for this, VR devices, AR devices, and also the ability to jump into the metaverse from some of the 2D platforms that you mentioned, Instagram, Facebook, any app. They'll be driven by different things. For some people, it'll be games. For some people, it'll be productivity. One really interesting one that I've seen recently is fitness. And it was a little surprising to me initially, but it kind of makes sense, right? Instead of buying an expensive Peloton bike and having a subscription to that, you can just use your Quest headset and get a subscription to Supernatural and do boxing classes, right? So that kind of makes sense for fitness. I think you'll see that. So it'll be different things for different people, but I think it's very broad. It's a general computing environment and platform. But one of the things that you asked earlier was, what's going to be different about our approach to this compared to other companies? And I think one difference is that we have this history of building social experiences, today primarily on phones. So between building Instagram and Facebook and WhatsApp and Messenger, those are a lot of interesting surfaces for people to start building up this creative economy, some of the things that we're talking about, as well as being able to jump into the metaverse. So a lot of the creator stuff that we talked about, whether it's around people building up a following, telling their story, selling apparel, that's already happening on Instagram and Facebook. I probably, most of the stuff that I wear, I probably bought through Instagram or Facebook shops or ads.
Right.
And it's maybe a little. I'm not sure if he'd call himself a creator, but it's like one of the guys who inspires me, Kelly Slater, best surfer of all time, just won a huge title. He's almost 50, right? And he created this brand of clothes, that Outer Known makes great terry cloth clothes. I'm actually wearing it now. It's super comfortable. It's like the right amount of terry, not too thick. I think too thick of a terry is.
Yeah, it sounds like a 80-20 blend. I got you.
Yeah, you gotta get the right balance on the terry. But he and his brand, they're big in Instagram shops and Facebook shops and advertise. So obviously, this is like a big part of how he's made this huge following from his surfing and basically makes all these different businesses. So it's kind of like that's like a lot of what creators aspire to do, and that's kind of happening on the platforms. Similarly, we talked about stuff like NFTs and the ability to long term. I would hope that the clothing that your avatar is wearing in the metaverse can be basically minted as an NFT, and you can take it between the different places. I think that there's like a bunch of technical things that need to get worked out before that'll really be seamless to happen. But we're working on bringing NFTs to Instagram in the near term, right? So just so you can, and I'm not ready to kind of announce exactly what that's going to be today, but that's over the next several months, the ability to bring some of your NFTs in, hopefully over time, be able to mint things within that environment. So you can, I think the ability to basically have these social environments and bootstrap a lot of these behaviors that I think are going to be even bigger in the metaverse, but now in these platforms that already, you have hundreds of millions of people or billions of people using, I think that's going to be pretty powerful. So I'm excited to use all these tools that exist today to help bring this next generation of the internet to life.
Yeah, I got to tell you, even though I opened up with talking about knocking down the gatekeepers, it wasn't even then. When Shark Tank first aired in 07, 08, it was very hard to get a lot of the products into the stores. But as social media conversion started to grow, we didn't need the stores anymore. And my top company, Bombas Socks, will probably do about $500 million, is purely straight to straight through social media and social media conversion. Now, Meta helped me in a great way. As the world was crumbling 2 years ago, I watched a lot of people out in the streets of all colors burning businesses instead of building businesses, and I said to myself, I need to do something about this. I called up Meta, I called up a bunch of other friends, and I didn't need a network to air Black Entrepreneurs Day. I just aired it right there on your platform, was able to give away $250,000 to Black companies in need and interview amazing people. How else are you going to allow underserved or underrepresented communities a seat at the table? How is this going to empower them with the democratization of basically a lot of things? The walls are broken down now. So how do you think this will help other people as well?
Yeah, so I mean, fundamentally, some of the stuff that we talked about before about just being able to access opportunity no matter where you live. I mean, there's some really interesting research. I mean, this economist and social scientist Raj Chetty at Harvard now basically did this study that shows that for a lot of people, their upward economic mobility is kind of limited by where they've grown up. So I think the ability to transcend geographic boundaries and be present everywhere, and this is a big part of the fundamental promise of why I care so much about what we're building here. But like you're saying, you have to be intentional about this. So we've started a number of programs around XR programs and different research programs to early on basically get civil society, get different groups at the table, thinking about what the standards should be, how we should be building this stuff from the ground up, because I don't think you want to just wait until it's developed 5 years from now to then start thinking about this. So these are pretty important programs that we're funding. And I think that there's like $25 million program for Black creators that we've started, and basically trying to bring all these folks in so we can get that feedback early on. We're also really just trying to take different forms of diversity into account when we're building out how people can express themselves. Right, building the avatar system like we talked about. It's not just about like, all right, here's like a bunch of different body types and pick the color of your skin or something. I think it's really important to make sure that people see themselves in the system that's getting built and can feel like they're expressing themselves, or else they're not going to adopt it, and then you're going to end up with some skew, right? Where you're just basically you have some groups more than others. So we've been pretty careful to try to include things like wheelchairs and hearing aids and all kinds of things like that into the avatar system from a pretty early size, right? In this, right? These systems aren't huge yet, but we've wanted to prioritize getting that in because I just think as people are thinking about creating and having all these experiences in the metaverse, it kind of starts off by you get in there and the question is like, do I see myself in this, and is this like a place where I want to invest? So I think getting that right from the beginning is important too. So I mean the bottom line is here is we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to make our platforms work for everyone. There are a bunch of investments that we're making here, like some of the ones that I talked about. I'm sure there's going to be a lot more that we need to do too, but this is like the fundamental promise of the metaverse. So I care a lot about getting this right.
And I know we touched a little bit about, and you touched on it a little bit about work. Now, many people here are parents who are watching. I'm a parent. You're a parent, and no matter how successful you are, a 5 and 6 year old couldn't give crap about what's going on in your life when you're working from home, right? You're on their schedule. What do you see work looking like? Because now the geographical boundaries are down and so many different things are down now. Do you have any idea or concept on how work will look like in the future?
Well, I think that different companies and workplaces are going to adopt different standards, but we just adopted a new corporate value that we call live in the future, which is basically about trying to be forward leaning on these kind of practices around how we work. And for us, it's not just about adopting being distributed first, making it so that our company is welcoming for people who are going to live anywhere around the world. We think that that's important for getting access to and retaining the best talent around the world. But we also think that that's just the future of how people are going to work. for us, it's also important because we're trying to build a lot of the tools to enable that, right? So we want people, and we have this phrase around eating your own dog food. And I want people to be, working in workrooms, right? Not just doing video conferences when they're remote, but getting around a table in virtual reality and augmented reality when we have that in the near future. So at least, I think that things are going in that direction. I think if you want to access the most talent everywhere, which is the flip side of creating opportunity for everyone everywhere, then you want to be more distributed and remote. So we're definitely leaning into that. But there are a bunch of examples of things that maybe aren't going to be as forward leaning, and there are reasons for that too. Obviously, some kind of work that's not software development requires you to be in person more, right? Obviously, probably the stuff that we do that requires me to be present the most physically is all the hardware development that we do, right? It's like if you're going to feel something, right, or kind of experience, a new prototype that a team is building, or something that's maybe in the lab but isn't kind of ready to be shipped out yet, then it's still helpful to be right next to them. So I think that there will be a bunch of stuff like that. So I'm not. I think it's important to not be super dogmatic about this, but I definitely think the world is going in this direction of being more distributed first, and both our product development and internal processes, I'm trying to be very forward-leaning on that.
Well, let's talk about forward thinking. As a CEO, you started off as a very smart kid in Harvard who wanted to connect people and grow a business, and you changed the world. But now we're going into another form of the unknown. How do you instill that in your team to be entrepreneurial thinking and moving forward in such a gray area, right? And you have a lot of responsibility, and it has to come from you to inspire people to now move us forward. You're no longer the kid in Harvard, right? How do you do that and instill it? Because I think all the creators and entrepreneurs here can learn from some of your leadership tactics or the ways that you think.
Yeah, a lot of the shift to Meta for us was about this, right? I felt like we built out Facebook, got it to a point where a lot of people used it, and it's just probably one of the most popular things that have been built in the world, and then took Instagram and WhatsApp and helped scale them to be great social services that are basically on the same kind of scale as Facebook. And we could just keep pushing that forward. There's obviously a lot more to do there, right? In terms of building new social experiences. I think we're kind of just starting to get to the point where video is the main thing that people do in those services. But I think if you fast forward 5 years, I think it's probably going to be even more so the case that things like video, short form video, reels, there are a lot of awesome trends there, right? That I think are really interesting around, being able to recommend people interesting content, even if it's not coming from people they follow. A bunch of really exciting stuff. But a lot of what the Meta vision is about is sort of planting the flag and thrusting what we're doing even further into the future and saying, okay, yeah, we're not just going to kind of tiptoe towards some of this metaverse work that we're doing, that we're clearly putting a lot of energy towards. But I think before we did the rebrand, people kind of thought about that as a very secondary part of what we did compared to all the social media stuff. And I think in some ways it's sort of the job of the leader to basically say, hey, no, we're like, we need to keep on moving forward with our full energy. This thing that people think is sort of a side thing that we're doing today, but that we know is going to potentially be the more important thing, over the long term. We need to treat it like that. And even though it's maybe not the biggest part of the business today or the biggest part of what people are using, we kind of need to commit to that. So a lot of the Meta brand, some of it was external, but I tend to think that when you're running a company like this, a lot of the external communication that you do is actually to rally the people inside the company and get them. It's really powerful when people see me or some of the other leaders be willing to say externally, this is going to be the future. In a lot of ways, that means a lot more than me just saying, okay, yeah, I'm going to put some resources on this team to go develop this thing. So I don't know. I think just kind of constantly focusing on what the future is going to be and what the next thing is going to be. And I guess my experience after I've done this for about 18 years now, it's basically the future, I think, tends to come sooner than you think when you bet on it.
Yeah.
And it's not that like it's fully realized immediately, but I think you tend to start getting glimpses or proof points or a sense that, yeah, things are really going to go in this direction a lot sooner than you might think. So something that you might think is like 5 years out or 7 years out, it'll actually be the case that once you put your flag in the ground and say, we're going to go do this, it's actually, 18 months later or a couple of years later that's like, oh yeah, it's actually pretty clear that this is going to work. It may not work and reach its full fruition for another several years after that, but you kind of get all the signals and know it's going to work. So I think it's just the job of the people running the company to keep pushing forward on that.
I got one last question on your state of mind, then I'm going to open it up to a Q&A. My mother had told me one time, and I fully believe that there's one person or two or 20 in this audience that are watching us that will change the world. They'll be bigger than Damon, John, and Mark Zuckerberg ever was, and they'll take the world to a whole nother level. My mother always told me that every single thing in this world that has been created started with one person, with one idea that took one action. I watch, and I told you this last week, when we were on the phone, I told you that one of the most inspiring interviews I ever saw was you and President Obama speaking out of GES. And you told him that you heard no all your life and all your career. Oh my God, you have something on the Ivy League kids on this platform, but when they find out the regular kids on this platform, they're gonna stop. When they find out the public school kids on this platform, they're gonna stop. When a kid finds out his nana is on the same platform, he's gonna or she's gonna get off of it. When computers go to cell phones, nobody's gonna look at these platforms on their cell phone. Are you crazy? Do you still hear no? And what do we tell people out in this audience who are always hearing no?
Well, one lesson that I feel like I've learned a lot is that just believing in things and having a very strong conviction is one of your most powerful tools as an entrepreneur. But when I look back on the stuff that we built over time, one of the things that sometimes I try to reflect on is like, why did we build this? Or we were college kids, right? Why didn't some other company that had more resources go do this? To some degree, I think that there's this question today with the metaverse, right? It's like we're not known as a hardware company, right, or a computing platform company. There are other companies that do that. So if we succeed here, why will that be the case? And I think more often than not, we all have things in our life that we believe very deeply. Or it's like, okay, this is clearly going to be the way that the future goes. And sometimes I think you actually get blinded because you kind of have so much conviction that that's the way that you think the future is going to go, that you think other people must believe that too. Even if they believe it a little bit less than that, they must at least kind of see that that's an important part of how the future goes. And I think that's just not the case as often as we think. So, I think a lot of our story is, okay, so why did this group of college kids end up building the social networks that are most used around the world? I think it's because of all the things that you said. It's because, at each step, the people at the other companies that had more resources, more engineers, more kind of compute than, we were just trying to scrap together. They could have kind of easily done it, but, they said, nah, this is just a college thing or whatever. It's just a fad, or, okay, maybe it's not a fad, but it's never going to make money, or, oh, okay, fine, it's making money, but it's switching to mobile and that seems like an issue, or, whatever the recent business challenge is, it's like, that's going to be tough to navigate. So I think at some level, the future sort of belongs to the people who believe in it more than others. And I think that's probably a pretty important tool, not just for the stuff that we're doing, but I think broadly. And, I think for the work that we're doing around the metaverse and all of that, I think that's a big part of, my approach here too, is, I just think we care more.
Yeah.
I think we're the company that cares about helping people connect. Most other technology companies are basically out there trying to design new ways for people to use technology. We're out there trying to design technology to create new ways for people to interact with other people. It's a very different mindset on this, but we just care about this so much. This is like what we wake up every day and try to do. And I think if we succeed at this, it will be because we care more about that problem and believe in it more deeply than all the other folks who maybe have decades more experience doing this kind of thing than we do.
I think every single person here can understand that. If you care more about solving that problem, you will be successful, because if everybody understood what you were doing, then there would be no place for you, right? So why don't we take some audience questions? Let me see here. Anonymous, it's of an anonymous person. It is, what's the main technology challenges Meta is working on in building for the metaverse?
It's a great question. There are a bunch, and I think that this gets back to the last question, which is if there was just one challenge, maybe other companies would run at this as hard as we are. But I think the reason why we've sort of established ourselves as the company that cares the most about this is because we're running at a lot of the problems, right? So there's virtual reality problems, there's augmented reality problems, there's kind of avatar and social presence problems. There's kind of back-end computing infrastructure problems. So here, just to give you like a couple of examples of things that I think are interesting about this, the way that virtual reality, so sort of the fundamental part of this is, you're kind of rendering a scene, and you move your head, and you need to render it in 5 to 10 milliseconds before your eye basically refreshes. If you don't, then people kind of get a little bit motion sick. So so now the question is, okay, well, how can you do it? The first VR product that we built relied on being connected to a computer, right, through a cable. So then we're just constantly pushing it. It's like, okay, how do we do this so that way it doesn't have to connect through to a computer? How do we do that with basically like a mobile chip that is 1/50th or 1/100th as powerful as what you could potentially get in a computer? So just push on that harder and harder and harder, and get the thing to be smaller. I think one of the next challenges is, if you want to get the headset to be really small, eventually you want to not even be doing the compute and rendering on the headset. You want to be doing it remotely, and then just beaming and basically getting the content over the internet. It's not quite that simple. You're always going to be doing some computation on the headset. But how do you basically make it so that you're interacting with the world and then sending it out over the internet and getting that so that your kind of whole world can render within 5 milliseconds or 10 milliseconds? I mean, that's like a serious technology challenge. So this is the type of stuff that I just find super exciting and inspiring to work on. So you have that on the VR side. If you go to the augmented reality side, the big challenge there is, people have some willingness with VR to wear a headset that, maybe it doesn't look like something that you would want to wear down the street, but you're fine wearing that in like a conference room or, in your living room if you're playing games. But in order for augmented reality to take off, it's going to have to be socially acceptable and look good, right? So you're going to basically have to have a pair of glasses, which is, 5 millimeters thick, that puts inside basically the equivalent of what you would have called a supercomputer 10 years ago, that has like a display that has kind of the ability to have a hologram, projector and built into the eyes, that basically, has kind of speakers in it and it has lasers to do eye tracking, because that way when you're projecting holograms into the world, you need to make sure that they're in the right place. So you basically need to fit all this stuff into like a normal looking pair of glasses and make it affordable enough so that people can use. So, I mean, I think that this is like one of the most interesting technology challenges of the next decade. Now, I think that there's this funny thing where to some degree, people think about, large scale things as sort of the interesting technology challenges, but I actually think a lot of the time miniaturizing things is much harder. So,
Right.
So kind of getting all of that to be in a normal looking pair of glasses, so that way, we can just be sitting here and, in a few years having this conversation, and, you have a pair of glasses on and the audience does, and I'm just a hologram on the seat next to you, who's there, rather than doing this over video. I mean, that's happening. That will be here in the next several years. And I think that's just such a kind of mind-blowingly awesome thing. So, so kind of getting all of that to do. I mean, within that, there's and the way that we kind of approach this is, we have this like 10 or 15 year roadmap for where we want to go. And we have different products along the way to kind of intercept that. So that way we're not just, working out in space and hoping that it all comes together. I think it's really important discipline that you're actually shipping something every couple of years. But there are real science problems here. It's not just engineering. It's not just building, right? There's unknowns, and we have multiple teams basically trying to work on figuring out, what the right way is to get the lenses that display the holograms to be as thin as possible so that they look like normal glasses. No one has solved that yet. So I think that, we'll be there soon. There are good approaches that I think we'll get for the V1. There are better versions for the V2. But I just think that this is some of the most exciting stuff that I think we get to work on. And then, going back to some of the avatar stuff, the technology to basically have a photorealistic avatar rather than just something that's sort of cartoony, and be able to render that with a compute envelope of that is potentially less than what you would have on a mobile phone because you don't have as much room for all the chip and kind of heat dissipation on glasses as you have on a phone. I mean, being able to kind of do that kind of computation and model out, what a person looks like so you can express yourself and have those realistic interactions. I don't know, this is pretty wild stuff. So I think that that's just kind of maybe a quick summary of some of the main technology areas that we're working on. But fundamentally, it's like, this is what we care about. We're the company that's working on all of those things.
Right.
Maybe there are some other companies that are working on like a part of it. But I think that this is so fundamental to the future of how people are going to connect that this is an area that I've just really wanted us to go deep on.
Excellent, excellent. All right, the next question is anonymous. What is an optimistic timeline for the infrastructure around a robust metaverse?
Well, the pieces will come online in different ways. So I think, with VR, you already have Quest 2, right? So that is, it's quite popular. It's obviously not the kind of end of VR. There will keep on being new iterations, but I think to some degree, you trace back in every computing paradigm, it's like, all right, we're up to what, like iPhone 13 right now. It's like the iPhone 1 was sort of the kind of pivotal moment. And I think for VR, Quest was sort of that. So I think we're kind of, we're going to continue honing it and iterating it, but I think you kind of have a lot of the foundation there. For AR, I think we're probably still a few years off. I think you'll get things that can do AR-like experiences, like what Microsoft has with HoloLens, but it's not in a form factor that you would ever kind of wear down the street. And they would say that too. And then you'll also see things, kind of like what we did with Ray-Ban, which are basically trying to cram as much technology as you can into a normal looking pair of glasses, but it doesn't get anywhere close to kind of long-term full AR. It just allows some smart glasses technology today. So I think those paths will sort of converge. And my guess is we're probably, a few years away from the first thing that really like does what you would call augmented reality and looks like what you would call glasses. And then that thing won't be perfect either, and it'll improve from there. So I think maybe a few years on that. For things like realistic avatars, I mean, you have a bunch of this stuff working in the lab. No one has this working within the compute envelope that you can have on these devices today. I'd say I don't know. I mean, I hope we get that by the time we have AR, but I'm not sure. I think that'll kind of improve over time as well. And even before you have full photorealistic avatars, I think just the kind of avatars will start getting better and better. And there's a lot of stuff that's not just on the like pure technology side, but getting it so that you can have a creator marketplace of clothing and that you can have it be decentralized and interoperable through NFT is, I hope that will come within the next few years too, at sort of a larger scale. And then I don't know, some of the wilder, further out stuff, I mean, remote rendering, I don't know. I mean, it's not just about inventing it. There you need like telecoms across the world to basically deploy all this technology. So that's on it's if you think about how long it took to go from 4G to 5G, it's like you have to agree on the spec and then it takes multiple years to kind of roll it out. And we're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars of infrastructure investments that companies around the world are going to need to make in order to get that to be the case. So I don't know, maybe by the end of the decade on that one.
Got it. Next one is games have been built in the metaverse for a while now. What makes your project so different from what companies like Epic Games and Roblox has been doing?
Well, I actually think that those companies are doing important work that's going to push in a similar direction as well. I don't think that the metaverse is primarily about games. I think that part of what I think differentiates our approach is we're the social company, right? We come at everything from the direction of how do we build technology to help people interact. So, and that shapes all of the design decisions that we make. So for example, I talked in our Connect conference last year about how we're working on a high-end VR headset and we're working on making sure that it can do eye tracking. And one of the reasons for that is because I think it's really important that people can make realistic eye contact in virtual reality. Eye contact is when you're in person, it's like one of the most important parts of that experience. And I just think it's been a little weird after a couple of years on Zoom, where it's like you don't really make eye contact with people when you're in video conference. So I think that's sort of been a weird thing. But it's when you're there's a trade-off for everything that you add to this technology, right? If you're talking about the headsets or the software, if we're putting in the tools to basically be able to do realistic eye contact, that trades off to some degree around maybe making the device as thin as possible, or maybe it adds cost. So now it's gonna, the price for the device will be more. So there are always different trade-offs that people will make, but we will always make the trade-offs in the direction of what's gonna help people connect the best. And I think based on what we're seeing today, in virtual reality and a lot of these experiences, the fact that just kind of social experiences and hanging out have sort of already risen to the top in terms of what people want to spend the most time doing. I think that our assumption that that's kind of the key thing that people care about has sort of been validated. But I think Epic is doing great work. I think Roblox is doing great work. They both are also creating unique innovations that, and those are companies that we hope to work with on standards to make sure that all this stuff becomes interoperable. I think that those are both, good companies doing good work, and that's sort of, I think that the metaverse is going to need a lot of different approaches, not just software companies like that, but hardware companies like NVIDIA building the chips to power all this stuff. This is going to be like a big kind of industry-wide push. But there's a lot to do. I'm excited about this. We could probably keep talking for another couple of hours about all this stuff because there's a lot to cover. But I think also a lot more of this stuff will become clear, hopefully over the next couple of years as more of it gets built. So I'm really excited about this, and I think that it's going to contribute to a really awesome future.
Well, I really appreciate your time. I appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate knocking down a lot of the barriers and the walls and giving all these amazing creators and entrepreneurs the way to talk directly to their customer and talk directly to people and know what's keeping people up at night and solving those problems. So, any last thoughts? I think we covered it all. I'm pumped. I'm ready to get out there in the world and hopefully try to change it a little bit more.
Let's do it.
All right, thank you. And thank you everybody for joining us by South by Southwest with Mr. Zuckerberg and Meta. Thank you all. Thank you, Mark.